Welcome to our U.S. Briefing Show. Today, we're diving into the latest on U.S.-China trade tensions. Despite some tariff reductions, American shoppers still face higher prices and longer waits when buying from Chinese platforms like Shein and Temu. Chinese companies are stockpiling goods in the U.S., bracing for ongoing tariffs, especially during the holiday season. So, while things are looking a bit better, those tariffs are still a big hurdle for many. Next up, exciting news from Hong Kong. Following a temporary U.S.-China tariff truce, exports to the U.S. are expected to surge over the next couple of months. Manufacturers are shipping more goods, and optimism is rising, even though shipping costs remain high. This pause in tariffs is giving hope for economic recovery and new market opportunities for Hong Kong businesses. It's a promising sign that trade relations might be warming up. And finally, a fascinating look at U.S.-China relations through the lens of environmental and geopolitical lessons. Experts suggest both countries could learn from the fable of the clam and snipe, emphasizing cooperation over conflict. Plus, Hong Kong is making eco-friendly moves by protecting water buffaloes and upgrading urban transit. It's all about finding balanced, practical solutions to complex issues. Please continue to watch for more details. CNN highlights the ongoing impact of the U.S.-China trade tensions, focusing on the remnants of Trump-era tariffs that still burden American consumers. Despite recent reductions, tariffs on Chinese imports, especially those under the de minimis exemption worth up to $800, remain high, with postal packages facing a 54% tariff and express courier shipments at 30%. This situation has led to longer wait times and increased costs for Americans, particularly affecting lower-income households who rely heavily on inexpensive Chinese goods from platforms like Shein and Temu. The article illustrates the roller coaster of policy changes, including the temporary easing of tariffs and the strategic stockpiling by Chinese e-commerce giants in anticipation of a busy holiday season, which further complicates the supply chain and consumer prices. South China Morning Post reports on Hong Kong's export surge amid the U.S.-China tariff pause, where industry insiders anticipate a significant increase in shipments to the U.S. within the next 2 months. Following a 90-day truce, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods have been substantially reduced, encouraging manufacturers and exporters in Hong Kong to resume or ramp up their exports. However, this boon comes with increased costs, as many firms are considering air freight to manage urgent shipments, which could inflate expenses by 40 to 50%. Local businesses remain cautious, balancing optimism over the easing of tensions with concerns about ongoing high tariffs, especially on small packages, and are calling for government support to navigate the rising costs and logistical challenges. The South China Morning Post also draws a philosophical analogy between the U.S. and China's trade dispute and the fable of the clam and snipe, emphasizing the mutual dependency that persists despite the brinkmanship. The article suggests that a complete decoupling would be disastrous for both nations, as China needs the U.S. market and technology, while the U.S. depends on cheap imports to control inflation. The narrative advocates for pragmatic cooperation rather than escalation, warning that the current tensions threaten to escalate into a prolonged stalemate that could be as destructive as a trade embargo from the Cold War era. It underscores the importance of mutual understanding and cautious diplomacy to avoid a scenario where both superpowers suffer irreparable harm, much like the clam and snipe caught in a deadlock that leads to their demise. CNN reports that U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer defended President Trump's broad tariffs, emphasizing that resolving trade issues won't happen overnight and that some tariffs are about running up the score. During a Senate hearing, Greer highlighted that the trade deficit has been decades in the making and that the administration's strategy is already showing progress, with many countries approaching the U.S. to negotiate reciprocity and some signaling they won't retaliate. Greer also pointed to non-trade barriers, such as India's restrictions based on fake science and Australia's barriers to U.S. beef and pork exports, despite existing free trade agreements. The hearing was marked by concerns over the stock market's recent decline, which Greer dismissed, asserting that the focus remains on Main Street rather than Wall Street. South China Morning Post details how recent de-escalation in U.S.-China trade tensions has led major investment banks like Goldman Sachs and UBS to upgrade their economic growth forecasts for both nations. Goldman Sachs now predicts China's GDP will grow by 4.6% this year, with an anticipated strengthening of the yuan, while the U.S. economy is expected to grow by 1%. UBS has increased its China growth forecast to between 3.7% and 4%, depending on future tariffs and policy responses. Morgan Stanley and J.P. Morgan also revised their forecasts upward, citing the potential for reduced tariffs to stimulate trade and economic activity. The easing of tariffs, including a temporary reduction on Chinese imports and U.S. duties, offers a reprieve from previous trade tensions, with analysts optimistic that China can still meet its growth targets through stimulus measures, despite ongoing uncertainties in the bilateral relationship. The South China Morning Post vividly recounts the remarkable story of Lyle and Eric Menendez, who, after spending over 35 years in prison for the brutal shotgun murders of their parents in Beverly Hills, are now on the cusp of potential freedom. During an emotional courtroom hearing, both brothers took full responsibility for their crimes, with Lyle, now 57, openly admitting to the murder and expressing remorse, while Eric, 54, acknowledged the cruelty of their actions. Their journey from infamous killers to reformed individuals was bolstered by public campaigns, celebrity support, and media portrayals that transformed their image into symbols of remorse and redemption. Their family pleaded for mercy, emphasizing their rehabilitation and good deeds in prison, which contrasted sharply with the legal opposition led by the district attorney, who demanded a thorough accounting of their lies before granting parole. The judge's decision to reduce their sentences from life without parole to 50 years to life opens the door for parole hearings next month, igniting a debate about justice, remorse, and the possibility of second chances. Australian Broadcasting Corporation provides a compelling analysis of the tumultuous political landscape in the Philippines following the 2022 midterm elections, where the powerful Marcos and Duterte families faced a dramatic fallout. Despite their initial landslide victories, alliances between these influential clans have fractured, revealing underlying tensions that threaten their grip on power. The election results suggest that Duterte-aligned candidates may gain up to 5 of the 12 Senate seats, potentially securing the votes needed to shield Sara Duterte from criminal conviction and political jeopardy. Meanwhile, Rodrigo Duterte, now serving as mayor of Davao City from afar due to pending legal issues, continues to wield influence through his son Sebastian, who was elected vice mayor. The opposition's gains in key cities and the Duterte family's efforts to protect their political dynasty highlight a complex power struggle that could determine the future direction of Philippine politics, with implications for governance, accountability, and the enduring legacy of these political giants. Yahoo US reports on the controversy surrounding Donald Trump's proposal to accept a $400 million Qatar gift, a Boeing 747-8 aircraft to be used as a new Air Force One, raising serious concerns among congressional Republicans. Critics, including Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Senator Ted Cruz, voiced fears about espionage risks, surveillance issues, and the potential misuse of taxpayer funds if the aircraft requires modifications. The debate is further complicated by ongoing procurement plans for a new presidential plane, with delivery expected in a few years. Democratic leaders, notably Chuck Schumer, threatened to block Trump's nominees until the Justice Department clarifies whether accepting the plane would violate constitutional emoluments clauses and whether the U.S. government would bear the costs of necessary modifications. Ethical questions about Trump's potential self-enrichment and conflicts of interest loom large, as critics warn that accepting such a gift could set a troubling precedent, raising concerns about transparency, security, and the propriety of presidential benefits. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.